Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. When psychiatrist Elizabeth Darby becomes obsessed with helping a young patient suffering from extreme personality disorder, it leads her into dark occult danger as she tries to escape a horrific fate. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for Suitable Flesh. Alrighty, Luke. So it is time. We are here. This is definitely, I would say, one of the more anticipated films that we've had coming into 2023 here. We are both big Lovecraft fans, as people know on the channel. We are also pretty big Stuart Gordon fans. We do have a video, I think the second pick since we did the channel. Was that From Beyond or was it third? I don't know. It's one of the very early ones.
It was third podcast. First one, Werewolves. Second, Abominable. Third, From Beyond.
There we are. Yes, so we got to cover that. So you get to hear us gush a little bit about our love and affinity for Stuart Gordon and how Luke got me into him. So, definitely big props to him. So this was something that was a long time coming. I know that this was a property that Stuart Gordon was attached to, something that he was supposed to do. He unfortunately passed away and did not get to continue it. But his usual suspects, as far as like Barbara Crampton and Dennis Paoli, they kept it alive, and now we're sitting here in 2023 able to see it. And Luke, as a big Stuart Gordon fan, as a big Lovecraft fan, how does Suitable Flesh stand up?
Well, I was really anticipating this when we covered it a few times. I think on the Sunday Scaries, adapted from The Thing on the Doorstep, H.P. Lovecraft property. Big question mark for me was, how are they going to do this? I know Joe Lynch had come out and said we had found a fun way to modernize it. So I was excited for this one. And going into it, I got to say, did not disappoint for me. There is a lot of great stuff here. It's one of those things where it's always fun to see such a different take in how you do modernize one of these properties that is ages old. I think they did it really well. They made use of their cast. I know we're going to do a deep dive, but kind of getting into it, I think the opening here, I really loved it. With there's a body bag unzipping, just it really kind of sets the tone. Really, real fun pacing, I think, from the very start.
Yeah, and I think that this is definitely a really strong outing as far as HP Lovecraft stuff goes, because there's so many attempts in the modern day especially to bring this together that I just don't think they understand the material as well. I think they get more caught up in the idea of just we're doing Lovecraft, so it's like we got to be epic, we got to be huge, we got to do the mountainous gods, and we have to do Cthulhu and all that. And I think that the thing that Stuart Gordon and Dennis Paoli and Barbara Crampton, all these people involved here, what they've done through all these films, and now including Suitable Flesh, is that they just have a really keen sense for, just taking the best parts and the most important bits of a Lovecraft story and bringing them into something that's modern and relatable. Like, Reanimator it's like a medieval tale essentially, but they tell it in a college setting. You know what I mean? Like that's genius. And so they do kind of a similar thing here. And I think that that's some of the best ways to bring this stuff together. Now, don't get me wrong, I love stuff like Color Out of Space. I thought that was a very strong Lovecraft adaptation from a few years ago. But even that, you're just dealing with a family on a farm. You're not dealing with, giant monsters or world-ending apocalyptic scenarios that I know some of that stuff gets into when you start dealing with the ethereal gods and everything,
Yeah, and I think the great thing about H.P. Lovecraft is being able to take these short stories, and they're very abstract, very broad in a sense, where you look at something like Reanimator, From Beyond, The Thing on the Doorstep, even Color Out of Space to a certain extent. They're very short, max 30, 35 pages. I think most of them are off the top of my head. So I think that kind of gives someone like Dennis Paoli and, Joe Lynch also kind of a lot of room to play, make it your own. In even like looking at something like From Beyond, we talk about in the podcast, short story, and becomes very different by the end of the film because you do have that room to play. And I think, being able to take someone like a Joe Lynch and giving it his own flavor in a sense, where, you know, this one was, when it was being made, was basically in males. That was the dynamic, just like in the story. But he wanted to switch that gender up, and that's how we insert Heather Graham here. And you know, brilliant. I think that's a brilliant step here, especially when you kind of deal with these sexual overtones in a sense. I think it's very smart to kind of have it through a woman's perspective rather than a male's.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it works wonders here. Let's talk about the cast a little bit. Let's talk about Heather Graham. I mean, I can't sit here and say that I truly remember the last film that I remember seeing her in that it was such a big point for me, a sticking point as far as getting excited. You know, she's somebody obviously I've known from growing up watching things like, you know, Boogie Nights and, you know, all this other stuff. I think maybe the Hangover movies were the last time that I had remembered really like seeing her pop up for me at least. But, you know, I think that this is a very smart casting choice. And I think that this is also a really great jumping off point for her to, I think, potentially hop up into the horror space a little bit. Because I think that she did a really stellar job here. She has there's a lot of dual roles, I will say, without spoiling anything, in this film where characters kind of have to, you know, make a shift internally. And the way that she plays that, when she shifts and she's into that other role, it's like, whoa, like you feel it in the room, you feel it in the performance. And I think that those are some of my favorite parts because you really sense the danger of her character. And it's really intense.
Yeah, big thing from Pseudo Flesh, I think, overall, is just the casting. I think it was a wonderful casting. Everyone has really strong outings here. Obviously, Heather Graham kind of being our through the lens is how we're seeing most things here. Absolutely brilliant. Like you said, yes, a lot of comedic performances from her. I too second that. I think she would have a wonderful career if she really doubles down in the horror realm, because seeing the duality that we have to see through her character here, I think it works on so many different levels. There's you know, her being a psychologist, she's kind of that confidant in a sense, I think, to a lot of characters around her. But then we kind of see her kind of start losing it as we keep going through and through until she's at this very frantic kind of mode, and really off the wall in a sense, really, as we progress through this film. And I buy all of it. I think, you know, just when she's completely composed, as versus when she's completely frantic, I think it all works on so many levels. I think, you know, she tweaks her performances just so slightly that you can see that duality, which, you know, is very hard for actors. And I think you get that across the board here, without spoiling anything. You get to see that through everybody. And again, such strong casting. Everyone, even in here, Judah Lewis, I think, again, performances has dabbled a little bit in the horror realm with Summer of '84, but, you know, Christmas Chronicles more so lately, I think, and then The Babysitter, you know, but being able to kind of get this performance from him where it's more so on his shoulders and really gets to stretch his arms in a sense and really show different facets of his personality, I think I bought it all.
Yeah, and I think that he's also a really strong point here because he's somebody that you have to see very early on in a lot of very weak states where he has to play very meek, very scared. But then predominantly through the film, he is an imposing force. And I think I really bought into his character a lot. I know for some it might be a little bit of I think for him in particular, I think just because Heather Graham is so seasoned, and she is somebody that we've seen strong performances before in the past, that I think I buy into her a little bit more. She's got that star power, as to where Judah Lewis is still someone who I think is pretty new. But when it comes to seeing him kind of shift into, you know, this darker side, it takes you a second, because it's like you were just seeing this kind of scared kid for a moment there. And I mean, he's a college student, but, you know, it's like he does give that energy of just being young and afraid. And yeah, when you see him just shift into that demeanor, I buy into it, especially as the film goes on. There's a particular scene involving some handcuffs I'll mention that I thought was a very smart setup. I loved everything about that like 15-minute window in the film there. I thought that was really creative. There was a lot of cool elements there. And yeah, it's a big moment of discovery. And I think that it also is one of the highlights for another element in this that we'll talk about here shortly. But yeah, I think the cast all in all is great. I mean, of course, Barbara Crampton, she has to come back for something like this. I mean, it just wouldn't feel right, without her. And I love her. I think that she's great. She's been in so many movies that we've seen the last, couple of months here, man. Like she was just in Onyx the Fortuitous. She has a smaller role in there that I saw over the weekend, but she was also in The Last Stop in Yuma County. And, I just think that she's wonderful. And I love seeing her on screen more and more as the year has gone on. And I just cannot get enough of her. I think that she's turned out two really fun performances in Onyx and Yuma. But here, I mean, she's great. She really is playing back on all, firing on all cylinders. It just feels like she's never missed a beat in a Lovecraft story.
Absolutely. And, we had just seen The Exorcist Believer, and we kind of talked about, maybe some of the cameos in there just being kind of more ceremonial in a sense, where those characters really don't do too much to really facilitate the story, at least in that installment. I think this is anything but. There's a lot of material for Barbara Crampton to kind of really go through, and especially as we work our way toward the end of the film, you really get to see her kind of really roll up her sleeves and get a little dirty, as they say. I think it was really great. Again, the characters here, they play so well off each other. Heather Graham, Julia Lewis, Barbara Crampton. I think every time they're all in scenes together interacting, I buy everything that they're throwing out. And like Julia Lewis, you said, is kind of a little more unseasoned than a Barbara Crampton or Heather Graham, but I think it all really works. I think that, again, I keep going back to duality because we're not really getting into spoilers, but being able to kind of buy it from all three characters, I think works, because sometimes you really have that weak link, but for me, I didn't see it in suitable flesh.
No, I agree. I think that they really held themselves very well throughout this film. I want to talk a little bit more about kind of the effects and kind of how this all works out, because I think one of the big things that you expect, especially from a Dennis Paoli adapting Lovecraft, is that we've learned that there's going to be a lot of practical effects and a lot of visual guts and gore and things like that that you're used to seeing. And I'm not saying that the film doesn't have that. It does have that, and it's very effective and very well done. But I just want to preface this by saying maybe there's not as much as maybe some of you will be expecting. I think that there are some elements in here that will surprise you. I think that there's way more about intention and the danger and the usage of again, this has been talked about as being a very sex heavy film. I think it's more about just intention and just what people can do with just their own skin and bone, and how that can really play into twisting and kind of getting under people's skin per se. And I think that they do a really good job with that. But I will say, when the effects are on screen, and in the third act they most certainly are, it's awesome. There is a specific sequence with a car and a backup cam. Very cool. I love the way that was shot. I love the way that they used it. They could have easily cut to show more, and they didn't. They held strong with it. I thought it was creative and a very smart choice. And then you're gonna get your good goopy gore in the third act, so don't worry, just stick with the story. And I gotta say, it's not like you have to sit for very long. This movie is kind of a breeze to sit through. I really found myself just running through it, and I was like, oh wow, it's almost over. Like, it's a good sign.
Yeah, the ending really does creep up on you, because I wasn't even prepared. I was like, wait, I have 10 minutes left in this film. But that's always a good thing, because they leave you wanting more. Looking at this with the effects and everything, like looking at something like a Reanimator or From Beyond, where that's kind of like a sci-fi horror where you have these really big set pieces. I think right out of the gate, especially when I'm thinking of like From Beyond with what they're dealing with. And you kind of have that throughout. I think Suitable Flesh kind of fits into, and I know Joe Lynch had talked about it, kind of more so kind of that film noir, a little bit thriller. I know he was kind of chasing that Basic Instinct feel, in which I think, I was getting those vibes probably 20 minutes into it. So I think maybe it's a little bit different than something like a Reanimator or From Beyond, where we're seeing very heavy into science fiction. Here we do get those practical effects, but it makes you work more toward the end for it. You're not really getting it spruced throughout or sprinkled throughout the actual film. But when it does show up in that third act, I think it's totally worth it. You're not getting like huge monsters or anything like that, so don't really go into suitable flesh really expecting that. I don't think it needs that. It's a very different story. Again, it is very Basic Instinct like, and I do enjoy that because I love my Reanimators, I love my From Beyonds, but there's a different tone here, and I think it really does work.
Yeah, and I think going from the practical effects, we can talk about it again. I've brought it up several times. Is just that I went into this expecting, because a lot of people were calling this softcore porn. I went in expecting just a lot of gratuitous nudity and things like that. I think that even in Joe Lynch's past with things like Wrong Turn 2, there's some gratuitous nudity in that, and there's some very interesting there's a very interesting sex scene in that film. But those movies are dumb fun, and I do have a special place in my heart for that film. But I kind of went in expecting a little bit of that, and I was very surprised with just how they implemented using sex and nudity. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about this, and I know this is gonna piss off and I think kind of make a few people cringe, but I thought that it was a very interesting take. That I think that a lot of the sex and the way that it's used, it's very much seems more from a female's perspective. We're not sitting there oogling and ogling over body parts and everything. It is very much that sensual theater of the mind. Like we're showing things, but they're not as like just for the sake of showing nudity. It's like it's not just because like dudes want to see tits. It's because there's a reason for this. There is a reason that the act is happening or what's going on. There's danger in it. There's excitement in it. It's a very well done, probably one of my favorite uses of just using nudity and sex in a film.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because to mention that to categorize this as softcore porn, it's ridiculous in my opinion. It's anything but, because like when you're in these scenes of two characters engaging in a sexual act, it's more so like you're wondering what the outcome's going to be, like what is everything going to look like after this, and that's because we're dealing with a particular subject matter. So I think even though there is sex happening on screen, I think from a storytelling perspective, and I think it's how great the storytelling is, you're wondering what's happening down the line. You're not really living in that moment in that sense. You're more so like, what are these characters' lives going to look like after this happens? And I think, like you're saying, that there's a point to everything. There's absolutely a point. There's not just a 5-minute filler of a sex act going on, and nothing goes on for 5 minutes. Just random example, but I think everything is because even for me, sometimes gratuitous sex is met with an eye roll, and I think sometimes it hinders the film's quality in a sense. But suitable flesh, I think you walk that line perfectly, where it's like it's in tone with the actual film itself, and there's an actual point to it, because every time it happens, there is some sort of outcome right afterward.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that Joe Lynch has really done something special here, in my opinion. I think that we can both agree on that. I think that this has really struck a great balance for us as far as just like the outcome that we could have had with them trying to, adapt more of like a Stuart Gordon style kind of HP Lovecraft story. And I don't know if, you would have put this in anybody else's hands. I believe there's directors that could do it, but I think there's a lot of passion on screen here. There's a lot of tones. There's a lot of things that you can just tell visually, and of course from the writing standpoint, with it being Dennis Paoli, it all really feels like it belongs in that world. And it does feel like we've kind of stepped back into a Reanimator or From Beyond. And I really do respect the hell out of that. And I think that he's firing on all cylinders here. Dare I say, this might be, on subsequent viewings, my favorite Joe Lynch film that he's done so far. I think that he's really stepped up his game quite a bit here, and I'd really like to see him continue on with more adaptations of Lovecraft. I just think that he's definitely really cemented himself here as somebody who understands this material and definitely gets just how to adapt it and not how to go not so bombastic and over the top, and really again just make it about humans dealing with a very inhuman situation.
Yeah, and like you're saying, I've seen this progression in his career where I'm not really a fan of Wrong Turn 2 at all. But like looking at like Mayhem that he's done and now Suitable Flesh, I think it really shows kind of growth as a director and kind of really, really where you want to go in terms of storytelling. Looking at as Stuart Gordon has passed away. And a lot of H.P. Lovecraft properties tend to really not hit with me. And sometimes it's budgetary reasons, sometimes it's just not the right take. I think someone like a Joe Lynch could really take on a couple more H.P. Lovecraft properties and really figure out how to modernize them. Is when I learned that he wanted to kind of switch that gender role and seeing it on screen and how well it works. I think he's definitely a guy to look at an H.P. Lovecraft property and then bring it into modern times now for it to resonate for audiences, because this one certainly did for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I will say, if you are looking, this is not a one-to-one Stuart Gordon adaptation. If you go into this, I know that Luke and I both were talking before this that there are very much Joe Lynch style elements, especially when it comes to some of the editing and the shots. It's just he works at such a pace with some of his films and a lot of sequences, especially towards the start when we're just establishing things. We kind of move very quickly, and it can be a bit of an adjustment, but I do think that he does strike a nice balance. It doesn't always work the entire time, but I think for when it does work, it is a highlight. It is very nice. It does a wonderful job of, again, feeling very much in line and in tone with some of these other films from this saga of Lovecraft adaptations. And I would really, again, like Luke said, like to see him tackle some more stories. I'd love to see him work in these worlds and modernize some more of these stories and kind of just give his own little spin to it.
Yeah, and I'll go into it. Really, only minor criticism was that some of the transitions for me didn't work from scene to scene. Sometimes I was like, I don't know really if that was the right transition to use. It was slightly distracting, but nothing that really ruined the film. And then there was only one instance where I don't think this film needed a lot of gore. And I mean, we do get it toward the end of the film. There is one instance where they kind of shied away from showing a little more. And I really would have liked to have seen them lean a little heavier into a certain aspect, just to kind of show it a little more in detail and maybe a little more gore there. But it wasn't anything bad. It was just kind of a little underwhelming when I was like, oh, you could really push the envelope here and really go down a route, especially when you're dealing with Joe Lynch as well as H.P. Lovecraft. I think, it would have been totally worth it. But yeah, not too many criticisms for me on this one. I think, very modern film, very different take as opposed to the actual source material. And again, it is a breeze to get through, and a lot of great performances.
Absolutely. So I think we've already said it before this, but we'll say it now, is that this is a must see. I think for us, I think that there's very few criticisms, if any, that we can really toss in this film's direction. It was definitely a very nice, easy breezy watch that just gave us a lot to think about. They play with a lot, and they do a lot of really cool things with this style of a story. And it is a style of story that in a lot of ways harkens back to some of my one of my favorite horror films with a certain element. And I think that, again, this is another really good example of just how to play it and how to do it. It makes you one of the best things that it does, and we didn't really touch on it because we can't really say much without diving into spoilers, but the predicament, the character, the entity, whatever you want to call it, that we're dealing with here, by the end of this film, I want to know so much more about where this thing is, how old, what's been going on. That is the best way, in my opinion, to adapt a Lovecraftian god, and how to do it is just give us just enough, and then let us ask all these questions, because it's just like it's the power of them. That's what it's supposed to represent, is that it's so cosmic, it's so out there. It's just, you don't know, and you're never going to be worthy enough to know. And I appreciated the hell out of it.
Yeah, and I think that was such a fun part, especially as we talked about different performances and being able to see this thing, in kind of giving these characteristics to it and changes in performances and things, and kind of getting little grains of what the actual personality is there, and understanding. There's a couple lines in there where they're kind of showing the age of this thing and how long it's been around when we're talking about, medicines and stuff like that. And I thought that was a lot of fun, where it's like, it's such a small line of dialogue, but it tells you so much. And I think that just goes down to the screenwriting. I think it's a lot of great screenwriting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, guys. Well, that is going to wrap us up here for our review of Suitable Flesh. Definitely one that is worth checking out. And yes, just so everybody is aware that Suitable Flesh will be available in theaters and everywhere to rent movies on October 27th. So yes, this coming Friday. Definitely
good Halloween movie.
Yes, very good Halloween movie. Make it a chance. Get out there, go see it. I think that if you were to sit down this Halloween, and not to say that this has those Halloween like time and tones, but I think it's a good one to watch just if you want to watch something creepy and mind-bending. But if you watch this, Cobweb and Dark Harvest, you're going to have a pretty good day if you just want to sit down and watch a bunch of horror movies during Halloween weekend. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed this. I know that we're excited to see what Joe Lynch will do next. And I'm definitely going to own this and watch it. And I really hope there's a good amount of special features. I'd love to get a commentary, get some behind the scenes. I'd really like to learn more about this wonderful flick.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, guys, that's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.